have each of the guests today tell a little bit about who they are so you know beyond the room what magnificence there is here today. So, Gene Peters, can you share with us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. I'm very pleased and blessed to be here. Gene Alexander Peters, and actually, I'm a research historian. My particular concentration is African American history, but in addition to that, I'm also a collector of African American artifacts. As such, I consider myself a keeper of the history because it's obviously important for us to know our history, to share our history, and as we go along this journey, to be able to share that with other people. So I've actually had a blessed opportunity to turn my collection and my research into a consultancy where now I'm able to share that story, that journey with people such as yourselves and with audiences and also with museums and institutions. My company is called Sankofa Exhibit Consultants, and it allows just the opportunity that people can see artifacts, touch artifacts, learn from artifacts, and just embrace the glory of our history. So I'm definitely happy to be with you today
Awesome.
because I know your journey embraces all that I'm about.
Awesome. That's wonderful.
Great.
Carla Brown.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, right? We said. And I'm proud to be here as well. I'm Beyond Braids, which is about consciousness. It's the evolution of making history and studying history and educating. I'm presently at Divine Nubian in Queens, where we are healing starting from the spirit on to the mind, on to the physical, and particularly with natural hair, with bare head from here to unhair, like Alethea says. And we particularly start with having conversations. These conversations that we're having right now are the same conversations that go on among our people, and particularly our natural hair people who are psychologists. I presently call myself a kincologist to include all textures, starting from the head.
Awesome. Kinkologist. I like that.
Michelle.
I am Michelle. I am back once again, Alethea's sidekick. And I am very interested in today's topic of history and culture. I'm my own self in my own family, just my upbringing and how I came to be is a whole history and culture lesson in it of itself. So I am really looking forward to this show today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess we have a moment for a music break.
Yep,
and
we're
we'll
going to
be
take a
back.
little break and we will be back.
School is out and it's sort of a buzz. But back then I didn't really know what it was. But now I see what happened is the way that people respond to summer madness. The weather is hot and girls are dressing less and checking out the fellas and tell them who's best. Riding around.
Hello, how's everybody doing today?
Awesome.
Very good,
Thank you
very
for
good.
that selection. You brought me back. I wanted to get out of
Haters
the
grooving,
seat.
who you telling?
I love it. I love it.
Loving it.
So tell us a little bit about you before we go into our spiel.
Yes, I'm DJ Prince, and I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up all my life in New York. I'm from the Bronx. And back in, I would say, in the early 80s, I founded this craft called DJing, being from one of the young kids in the neighborhood of the South Bronx, coming up from
Paula and I talk about often when you have those people who go into corporate or executive positions and they dare to be bare or with locks or any of those things going on, it's an inner confidence and there's an inner spirit, that warrior spirit that says, in spite of the surrounding that I'm in,
Right.
I get to call myself by the name I give, and those
That's
around me
right.
have to answer. So Carla, when you have the client who's coming to you with the frustration of, I'm going from this chemical example of what I'm supposed to look like to who am I and what am I supposed to offer myself going on in
Yes.
the behavior and mindset of
Definitely
children in
so.
the school system. So
Definitely so.
how do you address the hair bullying and talk about Tyler, because hopefully we'll be able to have him on in a
Yes.
few weeks as well.
Um, with hair bullying, our children are taunting each other for having kinky hair. Still talking about nigger nap, PZ naps, what you're doing, you're going to cut your hair, you're going to cut your fingers on it. Now that has to come from the community. I cannot believe that children were born with knowing those kind of terminologies. So that's something that you're hearing from home or the community, and then those children bring it to other children. They're pulling hair. I've heard of taking gum and putting it in the hair, in the braids, where that child might have to cut off their hair. I've heard of pulling the weave that was on the doctor's into the point that the child's hair was bleeding and had to get surgery.
Right. So what do you say to the child sitting in your chair or their parents? Because there's a two-part thing here.
The
Right.
parent, well, number one, the parent does have to take responsibility in terms of learning history and education, and then they must, to me, have a dialogue with the principal and bring in programs that address that, because we're all out here educating. There are many of us who teach about the history and what's going on. It has to be more programs all over addressing these issues, and I feel that's what's missing. And then you also have books. I mean, a long-term book that's been out is Cornrows by Camille Yarbo that talks about our history and ancestry. It wasn't taken seriously.
So what did you share with the listeners? What did you say to Tyler when he first, young man, tell a little bit about how that whole conversation evolved?
With Tyler, he's a young man who decided that he wanted to wear his hair natural at an early age. So my dialogue with him was saying, you must know your history and give him a little bit at a time. For example, who's Jesus Christ? What do they describe him like in Revelations? It's like burnished bronze and hair like lamb's wool. We know what that looks like. Going through some of the pictures, reading Journey of a Shanghai People, reading 400 Years Without the Comb, so that when children would tease him, he then took on the posture of educating, saying, don't hate. And he has beautiful, thick, kinky hair, curly hair, and he'll educate them about what his hair can do so many things, like the cornrows, like the twist. It's soft, it's cottony. Many of the kids want to know what that feels like, and those who are curious and open to learn it, they'll be, oh, that feels soft, oh, your hair looks nice. So he is now in the front seat in terms of being able to educate.
That's the difference, though, because he's armored with information, and in a positive way, you went from not teaching him to fight back in a physical sense, but fight back in being able to orate what it is that's going on with you from the inside, teaching people how to treat you, and also giving them information that might also expand their understanding of maybe it's that they're curious about you, not that they just want to shut you down
Right.
and make less of you. So I think there's a powerful message in that, which is also at a later time we'll have a program on Youth Be Heard, because I wanted the young voices to actually be present in
their
the studio
experience.
and sharing with adults ears being what we've been for a moment. And really this is coming full circle. What I'm saying between history and culture, it's information being shared, being sort of woven together so that we get all of these different dynamics about self-love, but also we get to enlighten
Educate
those around
others.
us. Exactly.
Right.
And I see there's these comedy almost talent show kind of showcases, and there's a comedian sister who has a bare head. I've been trying to remember what her name was.
I can't remember what her name is. So callers or listeners, if you happen to remember the woman's name, and she does a fantastic show.
Exactly.
And she has a whole bit about how people approach her and her having the bare head. And it is actually hilarious. I mean, some of the stuff has happened to us,
Exactly.
but her putting her comedic point
spin
on it.
right.
Oh man,
Exactly.
it's just funny.
It's an art form, and I think that that's what armors us a lot of times, is being able to look at ourselves from the inside out and work those different layers, so that when something happens, like someone says something to you that's negative, you get to flip it on its edge and turn it in a different way. Because I think sometimes the verbal assault that we experience when we're so different in a sea of people who have a comfort in looking like the masses, they don't know how to respond to that. And so what happens to us is we have to be educating them. Like last night, I'm coming in my building, and we had a gentleman pass me by in the hallway, and he said, "That's bold, sister. That's bold." And I'm thinking, when I did it, I wasn't thinking.
Thinking
that.
is bold.
So we have a caller on the line. Caller, hi. Who are you? Hello.
Oh, hello,
Hello.
Sister Patricia.
You don't know. This is part of our collective. Patricia is one of our
Hi.
Barehead beauties.
Hi.
Did you have a question or a comment to join in with us?
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
A quick story.
Okay.
I think maybe the comedian, I'm thinking of a spoken word artist spearheaded. Her name is Steve Patterson. That's what you're talking about.
I'm not sure. I don't
I'm not
know.
sure, but I'll look. If you're listening, Tootie Patterson, call in.
Yes. So what's your question or your comment, Patricia?
My quick comment is that, as you all know, the collective that I dress is, I honor our ancestors as much as possible with my bare head,
Yes.
that we want to see, and all our other, African ancestors from the diaspora, very stylish dress, very eclectic, very Afrocentric, very interesting. This past week, I wore pinstripes for the first time in a long time, many years.
Okay.
And I got all kinds of reactions, and probably the most poignant one for me is that one of the partners in the office who I've been speaking with for about 30 years, she's been there over 30 years, I've been there 20 years officially now, and she saw me dressing for lunch, searching for makeup, and she turned and she said, "No, that's nice, that's great, it's right for you." But I like I love everything else you wear. Your bare
See?
the clothing.
Yes.
I love all that.
Yes.
See?
That's when you are true to yourself, that others will call you by the name you give.
The
And that's
energy.
testimony right there, that
Very
people
true.
can make choices, but if you're consistent, people will start understanding and grabbing onto that idea and notion. Thank you for that, Patricia.
Yes. And I think as well, we as people who take on the identity of being true to ourselves and being courageous enough
Yes.
to allow ourselves to be named and for others to identify us by that name, we have to be open.
Yes.
We have to be open to people asking questions. You have to be
Yes.
open to the curiosity. I am the only woman of color when I go to temple on Fridays, and it is crazy the type of questions I get. But more than not, I'm getting, because of this world is the world is not as vast as we think it is. We have a lot of mixing of cultures and mixing of races, and we have a lot of grandmothers who are coming up to me and going, my hair dry and brittle, and I'm open to the questions. A lot of people was like, "Oh, didn't you take offense? Why on earth would they come up to you, the one black person in the whole
Because
temple?"
you would
But
know.
guess what? I know.
Exactly.
And
We're at the tail end of our program today, but I wanted to let Jean finish a comment or thought that touched on something we were having words about. Just a moment.
Yeah, briefly, I just wanted to kind of go back to the point that I think you had made in terms of arming ourselves. And many times people might look at that negatively only because of the context and the social environment in which we're under, either on the urban side or international, but not speaking even politically. In regards to arming ourselves, it should be more than just when people think weaponry. But if they think weaponry, physical weaponry, it should be the education. The education is the armor I would like to see. Not to discount that physical weaponry might not be needed in different circumstances, speaking as a progressive radical in that
Right.
regard.
They have an
But
options.
in regards to the armor that we need to embrace is the armor of education. And I say that because we know that as a people, we've done that in instances as a people, but we need to continue to do that. And when I say that, you spoke about the young person. You spoke about when he then knew the information, when he was then able to then share that information.
Right.
That's the armor I would like to see.
Tyler.
The Tyler. That's the armor I would like to see. I'd like to see the armor that we are so empowered with our own knowledge of our history. We are so empowered
Yes,
with
it's
the
a
knowledge of
difference.
ourself
Yes.
that regardless of the circumstance or who might bring something to our attention, we can then combat that. So if you want to speak in those kind of militaristic terms,
Yes.
let's speak about combating that. Let's speak
Yes.
about combating racism, prejudice, ignorance.
Yes.
Let's speak about that positive pro-advocacy. And we can only do that if we then know that information for ourselves.
Awesome. So, Michelle, you want to let folks know where we are, how to follow us?
Oh, yes. Unveiled Unlocked Bare Elements is brought to you by Ambiance Entertainment. We are now on iTunes, you guys. So you can go onto the podcast and look for Soundcast FM Unveiled Unlocked with Alethea Brown, and you can listen to all our past shows. So if you tuned in kind of late and you were out and about and you got in and you're like, oh shoot, what were they talking about? You can listen to us throughout the week. As well as you can always visit the website. It's www.bareelementsunveiledunlocked.com.
Awesome. Okay.
Oh, we also have the Tumblr page. Don't forget, Olivia.
Ma'am.
We have the Tumblr page, and you can look us up, Unveiled Unlocked, because we've added a new feature called Wednesday Wisdom. So now that will give you a little teaser to next week's show topic, and it will kind of give you a little idea of what direction we're heading. And also we put a lot of other, current relative information on there as well. And I wanted to just do a brief shout out to Tracy Morgan's family. They're definitely in our prayers.
Yes.
Right now, he has not woken up as of yet from the very severe car accident that was had yesterday. So we're going to offer our prayers to Tracy Morgan at this time.
Definitely our
Ashe,
prayers.
ashe.
Yes,
Ashe.
yes. We have in our studio today with us Ademola Olukbigbola, a visual artist, activist from the 60s, has an amazing exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum currently, and it's going to be shifting gears a little bit. But tell us a little bit about the visual arts regarding the civil rights, because we went the gamut of causes, history, culture, and all of that in our conversation. And Ademola is joining in with us on this conversation about his work from the visual standpoint. So tell us about the exhibit and how long is that going to be up?
The exhibit is at the Brooklyn Museum. It's called Witness, Art, and Civil Rights in the 60s. It is a spectacular exhibition
It is.
that has over 100 and plus pieces, 66 artists. And the interesting thing about the exhibition is that when you say civil rights, in our community, you think that it's African American. But this is a brilliant piece of curatorship because they have such artists as outside of some of my brilliant peers and colleagues, Norman Rockwell, Andy Warhol, Richard Avedon. So these are people that you wouldn't think, because they're in the mainstream, quote unquote,
Right.
art world, that they wouldn't be involved
In that
in
movement.
the whole idea of civil rights. But it's a spectacular exhibition, and everybody should go and see it.
Oh,
In
it's
terms
an
of the visual,
amazing show. I had to look at it twice because it really is overwhelming to take all that time, history, and culture in. And it's an American experience, the civil rights movement, not just a black experience. So
that's the beauty of it, so people understand that there were many, many people who were involved. And that's a good thing to know going forward into the future, especially in these times, with all of the political
disarray.
shenanigans that are so prevalent today.
Exactly.
But in terms of the visual arts and civil rights, the visual sciences, which I prefer to relate to them, because if you think about vision and sight, so much of the world that we know comes through the eyes.
Right.
From your clothes you're wearing to the color of the room to, media today. It is so, the eyes are so dominant. So the visual sciences are critical to any kind of change, any kind of evolution. For instance, one of the things that was so critical, and I spoke about this the other night, when I was blessed to be honored by among
Oh,
such
congratulations.
distinguished
That's
Congratulations.
right.
Congratulations.
Yes.
it's a beautiful organization. I was so pleased and honored because it was Arts Horizon, and they deal with young people and training them in the arts. So critical because if you think about it, um, the idea of, say, Christ, for those people who are Christians, for centuries, for actually millennia, the visual imagery of Christ was a blue-eyed blonde man. So when we undertook the idea of demystifying and deconstructing all the negative images
Yes.
that were laid on our people in order to keep us thinking badly about ourselves and inferior. And the visual artists had the humongous task of reversing that negative image that
Yes.
prevailed for so many centuries. So even today, when you look at the activism of the black church and the change in the black church, when you go to it, now you begin to see people that look like you. And if Christ truly was made in the image of who you are, then we made that correction. So that's just one example of the tremendous effect of the visual sciences.
Well, as you know, this conversation could go on for another hour, and rightfully so, because there's so many layers to this. I want to say thank you to my panelists and my sidekick, Michelle, as well as our DJ Prince, for a tremendous contribution for today's show on history and culture. Thank you all for coming out, for sharing your thoughts and insight, as well as your expertise. Unveiled, Unlocked, Bare Elements is a weekly Sunday show. I am Alethea, I'm your host, and we have a show next week. We'll be featuring the voice of art, and so I would welcome you to hear what the various visual performing artists have to say in dialogue. I will be at the Juneteenth Festival at the park in Brooklyn with Brenda Brunson Bay on Green, so we will be able to show some of my artwork out there. So you get to see some of the other layers that I have as well. So I welcome you again. This is Unveiled, Unlocked, Their Elements. We will be back next Sunday.